Hi everyone, I'm back with another weekly collaboration with Julia McNeill Crafts for the Marie Curie Daffodil Appeal. Today I'm going to do a page in my art journal, Mixed Media. So here's some of the supplies that we'll be using, and let's get started. So I start with some quinacridone nickel azo gold high flow acrylic. And I'm just going to go straight onto the page without any gesso first to get kind of an uneven layer of that paint down on the page. The high flow acrylic is viscous enough that it will absorb at different rates depending on how thick and thin I apply it. So I'm just going to get a base layer down first, and then I'm going to go in with some gesso and just cover that all up with the gesso, and the gesso will mix with that acrylic paint that's already on the page because it hasn't dried fully. And I'll just get kind of a nice peachy color, but the gesso is going to give me a barrier layer between that bottom layer and what's going to go on top. So that's what I did here, and dried it off. I'm going to add some more high flow acrylic in the same color now on top of the dry gesso, just to start building up the layers. There's going to be a ton of layers in this background, so lots and lots of paint is going on. And then I grabbed some transparent red iron oxide as well. I'm just going to put that down on the page along with the nickel azo gold. And here's when it kind of went sideways. I grabbed the carbon black because I did want some darkness in there, and I didn't think I put that much on, but you'll see here in a second that it's pretty black. So it's going to take a little bit to work it out, but it all works out in the end. But it was a little took me back for a second because I started to get into that black, and it's like, ooh, that's a lot of black. And I kept wiping off my brush and adding water and blending and blending and blending, adding more paint, and it was still just black. So there's always a fix, so I just kept on going, wiping my brush off and getting some of the black out of the brush. And if you don't want to watch me build up all these background layers, just skip ahead, scrub through this video until you get to the next section where there's more design going on. But it's kind of interesting to watch how the background progresses from this really dark right hand side, and then just grab my roll of paper towels and rolled some of that color off. It also laid down a little bit of pattern. I'm going to try to zoom in here a little bit, and hopefully you can see the pattern from the paper towels, and it all ends up getting covered up again, but it does take some of the paint off and help kind of mush things together a little bit. So you can see the black has lightened up quite a bit, and it'll lighten up a little more after I dry it here. Then I'm going to go in with, what is that? That is the fluid acrylic in transparent yellow, and then again with some nickel azo gold to go along with it. What I'm trying to do is to add a little more color on top of that black, so it's not just a big blob of black. So a lot of it, because these first layers are transparent colors, you know, it's just a building up of the colors because they're so transparent, the high flow acrylics are. But it really gives you a lot of depth to your background. So Then I reached for just the Americana craft paint. This one's Raw Sienna, and these are much more opaque. So I'm going to start actually seeing some color build up here on top of, as you can see. And that'll help start to lighten up that background a little bit. Go back on top of that black and get a little more light in there. And then this is Americana Acrylic in Burnt Sienna. And we'll get some of that going here in a second. And you can see the difference when you apply just an opaque paint versus a transparent paint. It just makes a world of difference. But it helps to build up those layers, and then I just keep blending and blending until I get the background to a point where I like it, and I get it all dried off. I'm reaching for another high flow acrylic in green gold, and we'll get a couple of layers of the green on there. And at first it's hard, you can't really see it very much on camera anyways, but it's a really pretty color, and I really like it when I mix it with the Nickel Azo Gold. And then building up the second layer, you can see it a lot easier. And then I just kind of tapped it into the page just to get some spots of heavier color. And then the next one is Turquoise, Phthalo Turquoise, again in the high flow acrylic. And this goes on pretty dark, but I'll get it lightened up here directly. I just wanted to get some on the page first, overlap some of that green. And I blotted it off a little bit because it dries really fast when you do that. And then I took the Titan Buff and I mixed it with the turquoise that was already on my palette. Pretty, huh? Turquoise is one of my favorite colors. So you can see the background is already starting to get more interesting and varying the degree of color that I'm getting by varying the amount of Titan Buff that I add. Then I added some more green on top. Now it's really starting to look pretty, and I just like building up the layers in the background. It just gives the piece a lot of depth and interest, I think. Then I grabbed the stencil. It's a Crafter's Workshop stencil called Mini Cubes, and I'm going to use that with some texture paste to get a little texture going on this page. So I just use my silicone spatula and apply the texture paste through the stencil. And I don't cover the whole stencil. I like to just kind of feather it out and then move it along and add some more, rather than having a big square of squares, if you will. And dried that off. And I am just cutting out and speeding up a lot of the drying process because nobody wants to watch that. So, you know, the drying is taking a lot longer than what I'm leaving in the video, but I just want you to know at what points I grab the dryer and dry things off. Now my page was kind of curling up a little bit from all the media, so I clipped it down to some pages behind it to help it lay flat. And I took some of the what did I use? I think I used the Raw Sienna and watered it down quite a bit on my craft mat. And you know me and my drips, I love drips, so I'm just going to play with some drips here for a little bit and get them running down through the texture from the texture paste, and then I'd spray it with water to kind of diffuse it and help it move along. And that's why I'm tipping my journal up so that it'll drip down as I add the water. Or I think you can see it moving around the page there. So then just played with that for a while and thought I was done here, but no, I blotted it off and added more paint and added more water. That's what I was looking for, just that pretty watery. And then when you hit it with, then I splattered some too, but then when I hit it with the hair dryer, all that juicy wet paint just disperses into almost like a spider web, which I love. And then I had pulled out a piece of an old book spine and some cheesecloth that I had tea dyed and some old ledger paper, and I sketched a daffodil on a piece of the tea dyed ledger paper, and then I took this script stamp and some black archival ink and just inked that up. And then I like to do things in threes, elements in threes, so I have 3 pieces of that ledger paper and I'm just stamping those pieces. And then I also grabbed that little tea dyed tag. So I'm just showing you that I used the black archival ink to do that stamping. So I'm going to grab my watercolors here in a second and paint the daffodil. Koi watercolors, it's just a small set, but you can mix colors so easily, especially with watercolors, that you don't really need a lot of colors. If you have basic colors, you can mix all the other ones with a little knowledge of the color wheel. So I start with this deep yellow that's in this small set and just go in and start coloring it in basically. And I'm using quite a bit of paint because I want it to kind of stand out against the lines of the paper and also the stamping that I did. And because it's not watercolor paper, it's just a thin little piece of ledger paper, if I water the paint down too much, it's really going to warp that paper. So I'm going in with, you know, a pretty juicy brush of paint rather than a watered down paint. And the paper took it okay. So I'm just laying in the darkest yellow first, and then I'll go back in and wet mix it with the lighter yellow color, the lemon. And the other yellow I think is a cad yellow, the darker one. And if you haven't been following along with this collaboration that we're doing, check out the information about it in the description box. The Marie Curie Daffodil Appeal is helping cancer patients in the UK with support, and Julia McNeill is in the UK, so she's the one that, you know, we all joined up with her to do this collaboration. But it's for a really good cause, and if you can give, that's awesome. But yeah, check out the information and also visit the other artists that are participating in this collaboration, because there's a lot of really good art being made here in this collab. So it'd be awesome if you visited everybody. So this is pretty much all I did for this daffodil. Kept it pretty loose and pretty simple. But the daffodil is part of our collaboration theme here for the organization. So clamping that page back down because I know I'm going to start gluing things down, and it's much easier when it's not curled up on you. So now basically I just need to get everything glued down and get this finished up. Just trying to decide where I want to place the tag. So I grabbed my stamp pad again, my ink pad, just the black archival ink, and decided to go around the daffodil piece and also around the edges of that tag just so they stand out a little bit more. And I'm using the matte medium, fluid matte medium, and I'm just going to start gluing everything down to the page. Wasn't sure if the matte medium was going to work on that book spine, so I think I used the heavier gel medium when I got to that piece. But for the cheesecloth, as long as I put the matte medium just under spots where it wasn't overlapping or bunched up, the matte medium worked just fine when it wasn't sticking to my fingers. Yeah, there we go, with the heavy gel medium to put that piece of book spine down. Just needed a little more oomph to get that to stick. There we go. And then I just went back to the regular matte medium for the paper. And I always put it both on the substrate and on the back of the paper that I'm gluing down. Just grabs better, holds better. And just getting those edges and corners glued down securely so that they don't curl back up. And then I did at one point, I don't know if it made it into the video, but I took my brayer after I started to dry the daffodil picture. I dried it part way, and then I took my brayer and really brayered it down to make sure that it was all making good contact and there weren't any air bubbles or anything under that little piece of paper, because it's pretty thin, and it kept wanting to pick up. And I did a lot of stamping and stuff on that little tag, but you'll see right there my camera battery died. So here's the finished piece. All I did after the battery died was to add the tag, and the tag says the strong bend, and when I grabbed that G it was upside down and backwards, but I just left it. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed watching, and in the meantime, subscribe if you haven't already, and go make some art. Bye.